1, and we are really excited to do our presentation for you all, and we hope it's informative and that you really enjoy it. My name is Caitlin Bretz, and I live in Southern Indiana. I went to Indiana University for my undergraduate studies, and now I'm obviously at Ball State for my master's. I'm in my 3rd semester in the ABA program with an emphasis in autism. I am currently working as an RBT at a clinic for a little over a year now. I've been there. And our clinic specializes in one-on-one ABA therapy with our clients. We have about 30 clients in the building right now who range in ages from 3 to 19. 19 is our oldest one right now. I started out with a 3-year-old little girl, worked with her about 6 hours a day every day for 3 months, and then moved on to a somewhat more challenging client who is now 9. And I still work with him, and I'm in home also with him. So that's really a fun experience to get to see him in the clinic, see him in the home, and get him to generalize all his skills. I also work with another client who's 7 years old. So I'm really looking forward to working more with our academic kiddos, which are basically, we call them academic kiddos because they're funded by the schools instead of by insurance. And they're normally older, around 13, 14, 15. So I know that the skills that we're working on with them are much different than the skills we're working on with our 3 to 5 age range kids. I got my passion for ABA and didn't actually know about it until I did an internship at my current workplace when I was an undergrad at IU. I was going for an OT internship because we do have an occupational therapist on site, but kind of fell in love with the ABA side rather than the OT, so I switched that a little bit. And the best part of my job for me is just getting to see all the positive changes for the clients, getting to see the consistency of ABA working, and when everybody follows through with the plans to a T, it really makes a difference for them, and especially their families now that I get to see in home and see how the clients' behaviors really affect the family units. And that's just basically why I really love this field and why I'm really excited to continue working in it.
Hey guys, my name is Sarah Woodley. I'm from Southwest Louisiana. This is my 3rd semester at Ball State. I have been doing ABA therapy as a registered behavior technician for about 2 years now. I'm a lot like Caitlin, whereas my undergrad was completely different, but still therapeutic. I graduated with a speech pathology degree, and then started working in ABA, fell in love with that. Now this is what I'm doing and getting my master's to hopefully become a BCBA. I work primarily with kiddos that are before school age, so from about 2 to 6 years old. I do have one client that's 13. She's in the school system, so I go a couple days a week to school with her, and that's an interesting take, being able to work with not only those in the ABA field, but also, you know, teachers, principals, the school board members, because that's an important aspect of her life. So I'm excited to do this group project and continue my education at Ball State.
Hi everyone, I'm Kylie Yoder. I currently am working in Indianapolis. I, kind of similarly to everyone else, did not end up here by any direct means. I got my undergrad in sociology and business, did Teach for America, got a master's in teaching, ended up going back, getting certified in gifted and talented education. Eventually made my way to special education, and now I am getting a master's in special education along with applied behavior analysis. So didn't make my way here directly, but it's been an interesting path nonetheless. I love what I do. Currently, I am a teacher of record. I coordinate student services, and I'm going to be back in the classroom part-time this year, so that should be interesting. I'm working currently in a charter school on the far east side of Indianapolis. 100% of our kiddos are free and reduced lunch, or of backgrounds that come from, oftentimes come from crisis. So I find a lot of this to be applicable to the situation in which I work nonetheless. I'm super thankful to all of these girls for working really hard on this project, and I hope you all learn something and enjoy it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Estep. I am originally from San Francisco, California, and I studied recreational therapy for my undergraduate degree. I moved to Park City, Utah to intern at the National Ability Center, where I worked more with physical disabilities, a lot of veterans, and I became a licensed recreational therapist through that and actually was exposed to ABA. I had never heard of it before and then discovered it through one of my colleagues, and I fell in love with it. I work with children, mostly early intervention cases, so 3 to 6 year olds, mostly in home or at school, all around Park City and Salt Lake City. I have worked in the field for about 4 years now and am in my second semester at Ball State, and I'm now pursuing my BCBA to help further my career.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Boswell. I currently live in Chicago. This is my second semester here at Ball State, and I'm enjoying it so far. I received my undergrad in psychology, and shortly after that I started working with children with autism. I work as a registered behavioral therapist, providing in-home therapy. I've been working in this field for a little over a year now, and I currently work with younger kiddos. However, I'm interested in working with older individuals in the future. I'm excited to become a BCBA and continue my degree here at Ball State, and I enjoy doing this group project, and I'm proud of everybody in my group. We will now be discussing our study. The study we decided to replicate was titled Using Goal Setting and Feedback to Increase Weekly Running Distance. The study was created to determine if goal setting and feedback would increase one's running performance. As a group, we believed it would be beneficial to determine if goal setting increases running performance. We believe running can positively impact our health. However, we do not run as much as we should and tend to put it off. We were interested in discovering techniques to encourage us to run and increase our running distance. Next, I will be discussing the purpose of the study. Our group purpose was to replicate the study, using goal setting and feedback to increase weekly running distance created by WAC and others in 2014. The purpose of the study was to discover if setting a goal can increase running performance. Participants were asked to set short-term goals each week and long-term goals for the end of the study. By setting a goal and tracking it, the person was being held accountable for their actions, which could possibly increase their likelihood of achieving that goal. Goal setting may be able to help individuals get the exercise they need in order to stay healthy or accomplish a goal they may have had trouble with prior. Next, I will be discussing some supporting literature. The following studies found similar results to the original study. Travels and others discovered that setting direct and indirect goals positively impact academic performance. Moeller and others found that goal setting positively impacted student achievement in a Spanish language classroom. Umstead and others discovered goal setting had a positive effect on job productivity. And others found participants increase the difficulty level and task performance with the addition of positive feedback. Caitlin will now discuss the methods of the study.
Okay. So yes, as Ashley mentioned, my name is Caitlin Bretz, and I will be discussing the methods part of our project. There were 5 participants in our study, and they included Ashley Boswell, myself, Jessica, Sarah, and Kylie. We all range in age from 23 to 31, which is pretty similar to the original study. The materials we needed in order to be able to replicate this study were the Runtastic app on a smartphone, which we just so happened to all have a smartphone, so it was really easy to download the Runtastic app due to the fact that it was free. Another thing that we could have utilized, and some people did, were the treadmill to track distance. We also needed to have access to Excel and Word in order to graph and collect / track our data. In the original study, they did use a sport band similar to a Fitbit that was connected to NikeRunning.com. However, having everyone buy a sport band would have been really expensive, so we chose to use an exercise application on our phones so that we could save money and yet still be able to track our distance and complete this study to the best of our abilities. We used the same behavior definition in this replication study as the original study, which was that a running episode was defined as a continuous run at a speed faster than a brisk walk, and then that was defined as 4 miles per hour. For data collection, as mentioned before, we used the Runtastic app. We tracked the length of our runs in miles each week, with running occurring 3 times per week. We then imported the information gathered from the Runtastic app into a Word doc or Excel spreadsheet, which was used the participants' discretion as to which one they wanted to upload it on. The main purpose for this was so that the information was in 2 locations instead of only one, which would have been only on the application, because of all the difficulties with technology, such as the application possibly deleting itself, the phone dying, and other issues that just come along with technology. We thought it'd be best that our data was in 2 separate places. In the original study, the researchers used a multiple baseline across participants with an embedded changing criterion design. With our different circumstances for this group project and with it being a distance program, we modified this a little bit to be that each person graphed their own data independently and made their graphs a changing criterion design instead of a multiple baseline with changing criterion. With the shortened intervention time and the fact that we were all our own researchers, a multiple baseline would not have made sense in our case. However, a changing criterion really did. So that would be why we chose to modify that aspect of the design. For baseline, as mentioned before, when we first initially met on it and decided on this study, we decided to use a Runtastic app as a more feasible way to conduct the study. 3 women decided to run outside with the app, whereas 2 others ran on a treadmill with the app. The distance per running episode was recorded with the app, and then, as mentioned before, the definition for running was a speed faster than a quick walk, which was 4 miles per hour. So during baseline, the participants used the Runtastic app but did not set short-term or long-term goals. 3 runs were taken for baseline data, and there were no consequences or feedback during the baseline phase. The reasoning behind that decision was that our main goal for this phase was that each person saw where they were at when it comes to running and physical abilities, and to get to know what their bodies can do. And then they could start thinking where they wanted to see themselves in the future as far as running distance toward the end of this project. So that was our main reason for not having a consequence for this phase. When it comes to treatments for this project, there were 2 interventions. The first intervention was goal setting and feedback. So after baseline, each of us determined a long-term distance goal. And a long-term distance goal was defined as a specific distance the subject aimed to run in one particular running period by the end of the study. We also set short-term goals, and the short-term goals were set weekly in this intervention. Each participant needed to set a goal to run at least 3 times per week, and then also set a higher goal as far as running distance for the following week. The subjects were required to complete at least 2 of the 3 runs at the standard level or higher, with the most current run showing these outcomes. If the subject did not achieve these requirements, she would run the risk of remaining at the same level or lower for the following week. So for example, because I know that was probably kind of confusing. I set a goal to run 1.5 miles during each of my runs for the upcoming week. And in order to stay in intervention 1, I needed to reach that goal of 1.5 miles for 2 out of 3 of my runs for that week. And then once that week was over, I then set a goal of 1.75 miles, and that was my new criterion, which I had to reach for, again, 2 out of 3 of my runs in order to move on to the next week and where I increased my miles again. If 3 or more subjects failed to meet their criterion on several occasions or several instances, a modified version of Intervention 1 would have been applied. Instead of short-term goals based on daily running performance, they would be based on weekly. This intervention would not require a minimum number of runs per week, whereas before in Intervention 1, you had to run at least 3 times per week. This intervention would just require an amount of miles that needed to be reached each week. However, running level must be at or above standard level for at least 2 weeks before creating a new goal, which was different than the previous intervention where they made a new goal every single week. So this one required that they had their standard level for 2 weeks and then they would make a new goal. There was no extra reinforcement during Intervention 2. The only thing that changed was how the goals were made and when the goals were made. If changes from Intervention 1 to Intervention 2 needed to occur, it would have been my responsibility to tell those members, and I would have been able to tell if or when to put an Intervention 2 in place due to the fact that at the end of each week, the members reported their runs, and I would have been able to see if people were not reaching their goals or were reaching their goals. In our particular replication study, none of our members had to move on to Intervention 2, so we all stayed in Intervention 1, which was a really positive for all of us. For IOA, in order to collect IOA within this study, we used the data collected from each individual's Runtastic app, along with information gathered from our weekly reports. We used Total Count IOA, which compared the amount of miles the runner's Runtastic app said they ran versus what they reported weekly to the group. For this study, we had 100% IOA, which we were really excited about. We felt that it really showed our understanding of our replication study and that we had a good operational definition and that everyone was being really truthful as far as what they did run. Treatment fidelity-wise, we were using the Runtastic app as evidence of each participant's running distance to ensure all the participants were recording the mileage ran. The application on the phone or the treadmill would begin recording at the beginning of the run until the runner slows to a brisk walk, as defined by the behavioral definition. This helped ensure that everyone was being truthful and completing their runs. And another part of the treatment fidelity that was really important was that we all reported our runs at the end of the week so that we had that accountability and to our group so that they saw our results each week and we had more motivation. We will now move on to the results of the project.
As Caitlin said, now we're going to be discussing the results of this project. First, we'll start with Jessica's individual results. During her baseline performance, she ran an average of 1.16 miles over the course of the 3 days for baseline. When intervention began, she ran an average of 1.3 miles, where her goal was 1.5 miles. In Criterion 2, she ran an average of 2.2 miles, where the goal was set of 2 miles. In Criterion 3, she ran an average of 2.47 miles, where her goal was 2.5 miles. And in the last criterion, she ran an average of 3.24 miles, where the goal was 3 miles. Now we're talking about Sarah. During her baseline, she ran an average of 0.83 miles over the course of 3 days. When intervention began, she ran an average of 1.2 miles. Her goal was 1 mile. In Criterion 2, she ran an average of 1.5 miles, and that was her goal. In Criterion 3, she ran an average of 1.9 miles. Her goal was 2 miles. And in the last criterion, she ran an average of 2.4 miles, where her goal was 2.5 miles. The next participant we're going to discuss is Kylie. During her baseline performance, she ran an average of 1 mile over the course of 3 days. When intervention began, Kylie ran an average of 1.5 miles, where her goal was 1.5 miles. In criterion 2, she ran an average of 1.83 miles. Her goal set was 1.75 miles. In criterion 3, she ran an average of 2.1 miles. Her goal was set for 2 miles. And in the last criterion, she ran an average of 2.53 miles, where her goal was 2.5 miles. Next, we'll be talking about Caitlin. Her baseline performance, she ran an average of 1 mile over the course of 3 days. When intervention began, she ran an average of 1.42 miles. Her goal was 1.5 miles. In criterion 2, Caitlin ran an average of 1.8 miles. Her goal was 1.75 miles. In criterion 3, she ran an average of 2 miles, and that was her goal, 2 miles. And in criterion 4, she ran an average of 2.46 miles. The goal was 2.5 miles. Now discussing Ashley. Her baseline performance, she ran an average of 1 mile over the course of 3 days. When intervention began, she ran an average of 1.5 miles. Her goal was 1.5 miles. In criterion 2, she ran an average of 1.95 miles. The goal was 2 miles. In criterion 3, she ran an average of 2.43 miles. Her goal was 2.5 miles. And then the last criterion, she ran an average of 2.98 miles, and her goal was 3 miles. Now that you can see all the graphs together on one page, there is a functional relationship between everyone's graph and their performance. All the graphs are ascending, and you can see that clearly. So overall, each participant met their weekly goals, and the replication of the study proved to be successful.
All right, so going into the limitations of the project, some of the limitations that we found were that participants had to be responsible for operating the app and then reporting out the results accurately. So when they were uploaded to either that Word doc or the Excel doc, they had to be reported by the participant themselves. So there are multiple ways for misinformation, whether or not the app was tracking correctly, whether or not the information was recorded correctly, whether or not it was reported with diligence. Also, limitations that we found with most e-learning experiences, there are challenges with the lack of proximity, and then the lack of maintenance data was also an issue that we found. It was also unknown if the participants would continue to run without support of their peers. So these were some of the things that we found as we were going through the study.
For the conclusion, the results of the study confirmed adjoining literature that feedback and goal setting improve task performance in our study, specifically running distance. All of the participants' weekly goals were achieved through feedback and goal setting. All participants completed at least 1 run longer than their intended goal, as well as improving distance run per week. Positive versus negative feedback. The original study did not state if there was a preference in positive or negative feedback and what impact that would have on the results of the study. Research has shown an increase in performance with combining goal setting and public posting, such as social media. We did not post our data on social media in our study, but that could be beneficial for accountability and potentially increasing performance. Future research could incorporate public posting to assess outcomes on performance. The discussion. The purpose of this study was to replicate an existing study, which we chose. The study was WAC et al. 2014, using goal setting and feedback to increase weekly running distance. does goal setting and feedback increase running distance? We found that it did. Participants found that having feedback on their performance and creating a goal gave each group member a purpose and a strong motivation to achieve their goals. For me, I am very competitive, so having a distance to aim for was extremely helpful, and I was positively reinforced each time that I hit that goal by the feeling of accomplishment. It also pushed me to set and achieve the next goal. For further study, it would be interesting to look at how goal setting and feedback could affect academics or used as a teaching tool in therapy.
All right, we really hope that you guys enjoyed our presentation and found it useful. As mentioned before, we really picked this study because we feel like people often talk about, New Year's resolutions and getting in shape. And with this study, we found that if it's helpful for us, it could be helpful for a lot of other people. And clearly it was really helpful for us. So we hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions regarding our study, please put it in your discussion boards and we will do our best to answer any questions that you have. And we really, again, hope you enjoyed it and let us know your feedback. We're really excited to hear it. Thanks, guys.